Welcome everyone to my very first podcast and the inaugural episode of what I'm tentatively calling the No Food Picks After Dark, which is a spinoff of sorts of Baltimore's very best podcast, NoPixAfterDark, hosted by the one and only Aaron Dante, who is sitting here to my left, making sure I don't mess anything up too badly. My name is Chris Franzoni, and you can find me hiding behind the camera on my Instagram and TikTok videos on Eat More, Be More, and this is part 1 of 3 of a limited series that I'm doing, interviewing a select few of the most interesting folks in the Baltimore food scene. And my very first guest, you've definitely heard of him, and if you haven't, you've definitely had his Taiwanese curry fried chicken buns, also known as the Neighborhood Bird. He's a restaurateur, a James Beard semi-finalist for Best Chef Mid-Atlantic, a Vice superstar, a viral TikTok sensation, a philanthropist, and an all-around good guy, Steve Chu, co-owner and founder of Ekiben. Steve, thank you so much for being here on my first podcast episode.
Yo, I didn't know it was the first one. I was like, yeah, I'm down to do it. Like, yeah, Chris, like, yeah, whenever you want, wherever you want, I'm down.
Well, now you're in it, right?
What an honor, man.
So make me look good.
He is the best. Follow him if you haven't. If you haven't, like, you don't know what's up.
When you give to United Way, your gift could be the first spark of something bigger. It can help someone find, interview for, and get hired for a job, and provide follow-up services for success. It can break down educational barriers and give that extra help to a struggling student with in-school support programs. Give today. Spark something bigger.
Get a sip of the rye.
I appreciate it. So we'll jump right in with your background. You've spent a lot of time, your whole life in the restaurant industry, but you went away to college, studied economics, and then at the University of Maryland, I think, right? And then decided to get back into the restaurant scene from a hot dog cart, apparently, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how you got started?
Yeah, you did your research. How did that get started? So, like, growing up with like an Asian background, one of the questions that your family will always ask you every week since you're 4 years old is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer is always like, I don't know, I just want to play video games. You know, you start like making up things like make your family happy. Like, I want to be like a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be like these things. And you kind of like do research into them. You're like, I don't want to do any of these things. So when I was 13, I picked up Kitchen Confidential, and I was like a big fan of like Anthony Bourdain's cooking shows, like A Cook's Tour. Like that was the one that was always on Food Network at like 10 p.m. And it was awesome. And I read the book from front to back, and there's this one line in the book. It's like, yeah, chefs are kind of like pirates, you know, like they party a lot, do a lot of drugs and stuff, and then they work their asses off. And I was like, I think I could do all this minus the drugs part. Like, I think I could do that. So I put the book down. I went up to my dad, who's also in the restaurant business. And I'm like, Dad, I want to be a chef. He looks at me, he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. He said, okay. Tomorrow you're going to drop out of school and we're going to put you in an apprenticeship program. Like, what the fuck?
That's it. Tomorrow. You're not going to any more classes. This is it.
Yeah. And my parents were like divorced at that time. So I go home. I'm like, Mom, I want to be a chef. And Dad told me to drop out of school. And she's like, tell him to shut the fuck up. Like, what a fucking idiot. Never do that. So yeah. And then I finished school, went to UMBC, studied econ, and yeah, here I am.
Yeah. My real day job is a lawyer, and I decided I wanted to get into this like 8 years ago, and I just kind of started as a hobby. And definitely, I'm wondering, like, why did I go to law school now? I could be having a lot more fun doing this. Also, not as many student loans.
That's a lot.
Right, because like now I take pictures of food and video it. I'm like, great. So glad I spent 3 years, passed a few bars, and now I just use my camera every day.
Well, but like now you're not going to get sued with like any one of your videos.
True, right.
You have the knowledge.
I have the background knowledge. Yeah. So your dad said quit, started up, and then your grandmother also, some of your inspiration comes from your grandmother who had a restaurant, right?
Yeah, so I actually didn't really know this until she passed away. She passed away kind of recently.
I'm sorry.
And when I was younger, like eating food at like, you know, grandma's house, Dad's like, man, like she used to be such a good cook or whatever. And they're like, she's like, yeah, she had this little like side cart thing selling these call them tangyuan, which they're like savory mochi balls.
Right.
And we fill it's kind of like a dumpling. We fill it like meat, and it's like cooked in a broth, and you just kind of eat it up. It's like very nice and refreshing, filling, very savory, umami heavy. And they're like, yeah, man, like grandma's such a good cook, blah 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 blah. And then when she passed away, and one of my uncles had to like give her a eulogy.
Right.
He was like, yeah, like she turned that little shitty hole in the wall into somewhere where like all the higher ups in the military and the government would come. And I was like, oh, like she like did it. Yeah. And I was like, you know, like whenever people talk to me, they're like, hey, like what's like a piece of advice you'd give me? I'm like, dude, just like talk to your grandparents like a lot, because they've been through so much. Like that previous generation, dude, they went through so many wars and famine, and you have a lot to learn from them. You know, I think kids nowadays are like, hey, my life is fucking hard. I'm like, yeah, it is. And like every generation is fucking hard. But at least like you have like a roof over your head, you know? It's like Maslow's hierarchy. Like you have like that first tier. And whereas like our grandparents, they didn't have like any tiers, and they had to like build that shit from the ground up. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't know it was like so big, and she had like celebrities coming and stuff. But literally it was just a hole in the wall with like think about it, just like plastic tables. Yeah, plastic table, plastic chairs, like white paint.
Yeah.
Sold like 2 things.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me because my grandfather just passed away 2 weeks ago. He never made it to Ekiben, but he was 94 years old. But he liked everything crispy. Like we would go to restaurants and literally he would every server make it crispy, whatever it was. And also his other rule was you couldn't let the sauce touch the fried food, otherwise it would make it saucy. So that part we'd have to come in and order that separately. But just there's so much to learn. I mean, I was fortunate to know him I'm 42, and to have him around for that long and to spend time with him, and just the insight that you get from them and the things that they've seen over that 100-year period, especially now when things change so quickly, is just invaluable. So yeah, I mean, shout out to the grandparents. And again, you know, I'll second your advice. If you have them, hang out with them. You can learn a lot, definitely.
And always order it crispy.
And always
sauce inside.
Always
extra hard.
It messes it up. It gets soggy if it sits there too long. That, and if you ordered, you'd go out to a restaurant and loved soup, and he would always order the soup du jour and not know what the soup was, and then get mad when it showed up and it wasn't the soup that he had the time before. I'm like, wait, do not. I was like, sorry, it's okay. And then he would order. They would also ask him, or they would also bring him like his drink with it. They'd say, what would you like to drink? He'd say, you can't give me a drink with this soup. I can't have a cold drink with hot soup. Are you crazy? This is stuff that they said. It's just hilarious, you know. And those memories will, you know, I'll never go to a restaurant again and think about ordering a cold drink with hot soup.
I mean, it's true. I think it's like something from their generation, because I brought my grandparents to Chipotle one time. Like, what the fuck is this shit? Why is the rice hot and why is the sauce cold? And I was like, it's a burrito bowl. Like, oh, this is nonsense. You pay for this? Like,
yes, yeah, you pay for this. And everything was too expensive too, no matter what it was. And he, you know, being, you know, around for so long, that he I think he retired from 3 different jobs and would still worry about the cost of things and ordering it. Like he wouldn't do it. He'd still go for like the most basic stuff. But yeah,
only Costco is acceptable.
Right.
Costco pizza.
His actual one of his favorite foods was, so he went to the hospital a few times, and he would go to GBMC, and he loved the food at GBMC. Like he would request it, and he had his order down. He would call, but yeah,
turkey sandwich all day, baby, extra mayo.
Exactly. So moving on a little bit, the James Beard semi-finalist for Best Chef Mid-Atlantic. I mean, that's a pretty big achievement. How did that come about? I think most people probably don't know the process and how that works out.
Yeah,
just talk about.
It's pretty funny. I think like any chef, dreamer, whatever, like always aspires for like that award, especially if you're not in Michelin starred city.
Right.
So for us, like the highest we could go was a James Beard, and then kind of got tired of it. I was like, man, like they're never coming. They're fucking never coming. It's not happening. And literally, we told the team, we're like, let's not like go for these awards. Like, let's just recalibrate and really focus on our guests. And then, like that week, Yelp hits us with like Yelp top 100 restaurants in the nation, and then like 2 days later is like I get all these texts from my friends like, congratulations. I'm like, congratulations for what? Like I was in the gym. Right? Yeah, it was like the day we had a pop-up that day, and I was just in the gym with my guest Jay Lee from No One. I'm wearing his hat.
Yeah,
I'm like, wait, for what? And they're like, you got like a James Beard nomination. I'm like, Oh, for real? I literally didn't. I didn't ask for this like at all. But cool. And then I go to the restaurant, and I'm like, "Hey guys, like, we got a James Beard nomination." And I shit you not, the team literally looked at me and they're like, "Who's James Beard?" And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Well, we got Yelp's top 50 or top 100." They're like, "Yeah, this is great." Yeah. I'm like, "Okay, well, that's where we're at as a company. That's cool." But yeah, like, you know, Ekiben's always like been for the people, and our goal's always just be serving like really like good sandwiches, like one day at a time. And yeah, we never really had meetings talking about these awards. We're just like, hey, just put your head down, make sure everything's crispy, and if they want it sauce on the side, put the sauce on the side, exactly. And that's it. Do the same shit every day. Yeah, so it's monotonous, but we're busy, so it's okay. That work.
I mean, consistency is key when it comes down to
everything.
Those things. Yeah. And I think also caring about your product and your service and what you're doing, right? I mean, I think, you know, part of the reasons that, you know, I picked you and the two other guests in this first part is that you can tell how much you care about Baltimore and the city and, you know, putting something out there that's amazing. But I do see that you spend a little bit of time in DC as well. And I get a little bit of jealous. I tried to get down there. So I guess the hard-hitting question is, when it comes to food, Baltimore or DC?
Oh, Baltimore all day. Well, so it's very different. I think every state on the East Coast has its own particular type of like cuisine. So, and all kind of stems from like Americana. Like Americana is kind of like no onion, no garlic, but like, and people are like, oh, that's fucking gross. But no, food like that can be delicious. Like biscuits, like there's no onion or garlic in that, right? Biscuits and gravy, like. There's literally, it's just fucking sausage and like flour and
salt and butter.
And then if you're lucky, if your grandma can cook, she's gonna throw some chicken bouillon in that motherfucker. And it's like, oh, this is good.
That's really raising the bar. If you do that, you're like, it's serious.
It's like, there's no MSG in it. It's called chicken bouillon.
Right.
So yeah, if you go to like Maine and then kind of like go all the way down, all of that cuisine has kind of like some similarities. And the difference between Maryland and DC is like, the cuisine in Maryland's a lot closer to Maine than it is DC. Like DC is such an international city, and so there's a lot of demand for like all this like diverse kind of cuisine. But as Maryland's not as diverse as DC or even like Baltimore. I mean, to be honest, Baltimore is very like black and white, and then you got like all these Chinese kids from Hopkins are like, where the fuck y'all come from?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, like, you know, we're here for school. And then you have like all the like the doctors and stuff, and like that's really what brings diversity into the city. But like what we do really well is we're a really great portion city. We season the fuck out of our food. We're extremely consistent with our product. And you can tell, like, I think we're definitely a lot more creative in this city. Like, we don't have a lot to work with because of like how the palette of Maryland is. But like if you look at like Marta, they're doing a lot of really cool shit.
I love Marta.
Yeah, even like Comptoir du Vin or even like Clavel.
Yeah,
it's like it's just French food, it's just Mexican food or whatever. But within that confines of their cuisine, they're extremely creative, and the food's so flavorful, and it's always consistent. Whereas like if you go to DC, they have like a much larger breadth of cuisines to play with that's like acceptable to the native populace. But man, sometimes that shit just doesn't hit. Like you're like, this shit's fucking bad.
Yeah, I mean, you also get, you know, they're catering to a certain crowd. So the restaurants that you're getting down there, while a lot of them are amazing, are also super Disney World-ish.
Yeah.
Right? You go into each restaurant and like, oh, this is France. This is Disney World France. This is wherever. So you lose, I think, I agree with what you're saying, and I think Baltimore has a lot more character. And, you know, I went to law school in New York, so I lived up there for a little bit. I lived in D.C. and came back to Baltimore. And I think, you know, even traveling abroad, Baltimore has some of the best seafood anywhere in the world. It just slaps. It's amazing. And not just with crabs. Everything thinks of Baltimore, and they equate it with crabs and crab cakes. But it goes so much further than that. I mean, we're having dinner there tonight, the 10th Street Oyster House. Like that, we were talking the other day, that lobster roll, which I'll definitely be getting. It's just, it is as good as the lobster rolls you're going to get in Maine.
100%.
Yeah.
Like the bread, the butter on it is perfect. I think that's probably the best sandwich in the city for sure.
Yeah,
hands down.
Definitely one of my favorite bites.
Yeah,
I said next to the neighborhood bird.
Yeah, and then if you go get a lobster roll or even oysters in DC,
yeah,
most of the places like are gonna suck. Some places are really good, like Bar Sparrow. They have excellent oysters. I was like, oh my god, these are so fucking good. Yeah. But they worked very hard to source those oysters, and they don't get a lot. You know, they only like put out the best quality. But here, go to Dillon's. It's like some of the most beautifully shucked oysters. Yeah, we have excellent.
Yeah, we have Nick from the local oyster coming next, and I'm hoping he brings some. It might be a hard ask in here though.
No, fuck no, man.
He sets up anywhere though, really.
Yeah, seriously.
Favorite crab cake. Oh, we're talking about Baltimore food.
I really like Cuisine. Like big fan of that place.
Okay.
I know a lot of people say Faithley's. Like I used to go to Faithley's all the time when I was in college. But I mean, like Faithley's has gotten so big.
Yeah.
It's just like
it's like the OG of crab cakes, though.
It is the OG.
If you want like a Baltimore crab cake, that's kind of it.
Yeah, and like being in Lexington Market is like such a vibe, right? But I think discovering Cuisine, I was like, man, this is like really like north. I guess is it North Baltimore, northeast?
Which one, Costas?
Yeah. It's like northeast.
It's Dundalk, really. Or North Point Boulevard.
It's like super Dundalk, and it's like family owned, and it's got this like vibe that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And the crabs are always really awesome.
So that's my favorite crabs in the city. That's actually, again, going back to my grandfather, that was his favorite restaurant to go to. And I have a video of him saying that. It's the best restaurant in the world. He's pronouncing there. So I'm like, great. Yeah. I mean, the crabs are amazing. The seasoning. You get really big ones too. I mean, I know a lot of those are sourced from the Gulf and everything like that, but they're still
like a really good crab cake. Really, at the end of the day, it's all about how sweet that crab is, like how fresh it is, how local it is, and they got it down. You know, a lot of places try to get away with like canned crab meat,
right?
And it's like, bro, I can see, like local crab does not look like this.
Yeah, you can tell. So you worked in New York, Baltimore now. If you could open a restaurant anywhere, an Ekiben anywhere, or it doesn't have to be Ekiben, I guess, where would you do it?
I think I'd still do it in Baltimore. A lot of people talk about how like hard the pandemic was and like how much it sucked, and it did suck, and it was hard. But I think if we were in any other city, we wouldn't really be alive. Yeah. Baltimore is such a like local market that like when the pandemic shut everything down, like literally all the neighborhoods just came out, and everyone just stayed in the neighborhood to support like their local restaurants. And to be honest, when we opened up Hamden, like the first 3 months was like really rough.
Really?
And then pandemic hit, and all of a sudden overnight we just got clobbered, and then we've just been busy ever since.
Yeah. You guys pivoted really quickly with the pandemic.
Oh yeah, we just put a fucking table in front of the door. Like you can't come in.
Yeah, but you can take it away with you.
It's like, why can't we come in? Haven't you read the news? Like, do you have a phone?
Right. I think that was the first restaurant that we went back to and did carry out. We spend a lot of time on like the Eastern Shore, and every once in a while I'd make a trip back to Baltimore to grab food and take back. And I think one of the first ones was Ekiben. Yeah. So I'm like, I haven't had this in forever. I really need it. I think we just ate it in the car too. I think I took some back, but just opened some up in the car and just like chow down.
I mean, for us, it's pretty easy to pivot because I go to Taiwan pretty often.
Yeah.
And in Taiwan, like masks and gloves and like all that like food safety stuff is like prevalent. Like when you go to Din Tai Fung,
right?
Even without a pandemic, like they have masks on.
Yeah.
Gloves on, everything. So for us, like for me, it was like pretty normal. I was like, oh, we'll just do what everyone does in Asia. And for some of our team, they're like, dude, this is kind of like weird. This is kind of foreign, and they didn't know how to put masks on properly. But we're like, no, this is normal for like half of the world. It's quite normal. So it was easy for us to pivot and like explain it to the team.
Yeah, and you guys also harness social media really well too.
Yeah,
I feel. How is that? How do you think in general the social media has helped you, or how has it helped in her restaurants in general?
So before, like in the 90s, 80s, you know, like, so my whole family has restaurants, and watching them, they were so like beholden to like all the food writers because they didn't have a voice until the food writers gave them a voice.
Right.
So when social media came about, I was like, this is great because we have a voice and it's free. Like we are a startup. Right. This is free 99. We have a voice. Like let's use it.
Yeah. But
social media is hard. It's like, it is work. You got to grind. You do it every day. And the hardest part is like, it's easy making content for 7 days. Everyone's like, oh, this is great. But like day 273, you're like, well, what the fuck do I like post about? Well, you better be creative, motherfucker.
If you want to stay in front of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people look at it and they're like, oh, you're just posting, photos day after day. But, now it's not just photos. Now you have to do the videos. And it's like creating a video. I'm like, do I have to make a full motion picture for every restaurant I go to? And then I feel silly going to the restaurants. I'm like, am I recording every move that I'm making? And yeah, I mean, I try to set it up in advance now so it's not so obnoxious. But you really have to stay on top of everything.
Yeah, and like, I think like late 90s, early 2000s, like before social media really took off, I think all of these editorials, like they knew they had the upper hand. So it's like you couldn't get in it unless you paid.
Right.
And for us, social media was this big like dude, I'm not paying. Like fuck you. Like my family has been beholden to the system for so long, like shackled by the system.
Yeah.
Dude, my dad worked every day to like scrape a living for his family, and it's like, oh, here you go, ex editorial, like here's like $5,000. It's like, dude, that's a lot of money, man. And like, you just like sold your house because you couldn't afford to like pay your rent for your restaurant. So it's like, yeah, but you have to play the game.
Yeah, but I think that's, I mean, in a good way, I think it's kind of changing the system a little bit. I mean, I think they're still here, like the days of the editorials and the food critics and reviews are going by the wayside a little bit now. I mean, what I try to focus on is only the positive stuff, because I don't see the point in doing something negative when people like you and your dad are putting everything into it, their blood, sweat, and tears. Like, who am I to come along and just like cut them down immediately after that? Like, if I don't enjoy it, other people still might enjoy it. It also doesn't like help anyone, aside from make me look like a dick. Right?
Well, it really depends on the person, right? Like, we have had, before my dad's restaurant, like writers come in and then they'll like pull my dad to the side and be like, yo, like this wasn't like up to par, blah 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 blah, and then they held us accountable because they have good palates. And I'm like, that was really, like, I really appreciate that.
Right.
Like,
That's
thank
fair.
you so much.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of like writing it up like, yo, this place tasted like shit, blah 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 blah. It's like, oh my god, like we're so screwed. But yeah, these writers have a huge influence. Like, I remember that we had a write up for Jumbo Seafood, and they're talking about how good the mushu was. My dad's like, fuck, we're gonna sell so much mushu. And typically we sell like 4 mushus a day. And if you guys don't know what mushu is, it's like slowly roasted cabbage, and then they saute in a wok with like eggs, and it's like a really good exercise in like creating wok hei. And then it's kind of served like Peking duck style with pancakes, like hoisin sauce or whatever. And he's like, dude, we're gonna sell like 200 of these a night, and there's no way we can keep up. I'm like, what do you mean? There's no fucking way. He's like, all right, kid, watch. And that night it was just like mushu, 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 mushu. I was like, doesn't anyone want General Tso's chicken again? Like, what's going on? But it's insane.
Yeah. What was I was in one of the articles that when I was researching, that you do like 1,000 carryouts. Was it New Year's Day or like Christmas? Or
yeah. What? So it's Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Right. That's insane,
dude. It's nuts. And there's only like 3 cooks. And for Chinese food, it's like, if you watch Food Network, you'll see like people in a restaurant like on a range, and they'll cook like 12 pans at a time. But in Chinese food, it's literally like 1 dish at a time.
Yeah.
And we'll get about 700-800 tickets. And for Christmas, that means like each ticket is for a family.
Right.
And so each ticket's like $400 or $500. And they're like, all right, man, fire 10,000 General Tso's chickens. I'm like, what? And dude, we had to pop Tylenol because our wrists are like giving out.
Right.
It's exhausting.
Are you there every year?
Every year. And then not just that, all your prep's gone, and this is Christmas Eve.
Right.
And then Christmas Eve, and then like Christmas is the next day, so you go in extra early, you do more prep, and Christmas Day starts earlier because people know Christmas Day is like fucked up. And the orders start at like 11 a.m. and these huge orders.
Yeah.
All the way until like 8 p.m. or until my dad's like, fuck this shit, shut it down. And I'm like, I would have shut this down at like 1 p.m.
You're paying your rent for 6 months though. You're like 1 a.m.
Yeah, well, so kind of and not really, because you have to staff so many people
Right.
to accommodate for that volume. And not just that, like I've always believed that Asian food has been underpriced. And the only reason it's cheap, because everyone's like, oh, Asian food's supposed to be cheap. It's not the quality of the product. It's how they value their labor. And like, dude, immigrants have been historically underpaid.
Right.
And you have grandparents that are like, or great grandparents, like, I came to America and worked on a railroad for 1 penny a day. And it's like, dude, the average wage was like 10 cents a year. What do you
buy a
what are you
house
talking
for a
about?
quarter?
Yeah. And that was like this thing I was trying to like, get into like my family's heads, like their whole lives, like, you need to charge more. They're like, no, if I charge more, no one will come. And I'm like, no, you guys sell good food.
Right.
It's okay to charge an extra $1. But like when I
Right.
talk to my dad now, I'm like, Dad, you can charge an extra 50 cents. He's like, no, I'll raise it 10 cents because he's so scared he's gonna lose his clientele base.
Right. They'll pay it though. People will pay it now.
Fuck yeah, 10 cents? What?
Well,
yeah.
definitely 10 cents. I mean, they'll pay a few dollars more.
Exactly.
They may complain. I mean, people like my grandfather would complain about it.
Yeah.
And be like, $8.99 instead. What?
Yeah.
Fuck that place. I'm like, just pay the $1 and eat your China House chicken. Like, it's just. So, any advice you would give to someone thinking about opening a restaurant?
I would say like, first they should work in a restaurant and see if they can outperform their peers. And be okay with all the sacrifices that they see that they have to give up to outperform their peers. And if they're not willing to make those sacrifices, this industry is not going to be it for you. This industry is very rewarding, but it's also takes a lot, you know. But like it's like a give and take relationship. Like I have sacrificed a lot for my career, but I wouldn't do it any other way. Like that grind builds character, builds that tenacity that you need for when you open up your own store. And when you open up your own restaurant, it's not just about cooking anymore. Like you have to be okay to new ideas. You have to grow. You have to keep on learning. I mean, dude, you're a fucking lawyer, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna learn some new skills.
Yeah.
If you don't grow, you die. Like that's just a rule in life.
Yeah.
So people have to be okay with growing. And if you're okay with growing, you're okay with grinding, and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to give anything up, like, oh, I want my like 40 hours a week, I want my work-life balance. Like, work-life balance is like a full-time problem. But if you if you work in part-time, you can't keep complaining about full-time problems. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
No Picks After Dark is sponsored by Snug Books, an independent bookstore serving Northeast Baltimore and beyond. In addition to featuring new books for all ages, the store also carries cards, stationery, gifts, games, and more. Visit snugbooks.com to shop online, learn more about the store, read our latest newsletter, and find a calendar of events, or come browse the store in person. Snug Books is located at 4717 Harford Road, next to Zeke's Coffee in Hamilton, Laurelville. There is free parking behind the store, and opening hours are Tuesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The NoPixAfterDark podcast is fueled by Zeke's Coffee. Have you tried their coffee yet? I'm telling you, there's something different about it. Maybe it's because they roast their beans in a fluid coffee roaster, which provides the most accurate roasting temperatures and made with love. You would just have to check it out for yourself and try their delicious food while you're at it. Open now for curbside service, online ordering, carry out, and they also do wholesale. Visit Zeke's Coffee at 4719 Hartford Road. Open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Sunday, 8 to 5 p.m. Kitchen closes at 3 p.m. or visit Zeke'sCoffee.com and you too can be fueled by Zeke's.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to put the work in. So lastly, anything you want the audience to know. Plug whatever you want. And tell people where they can find you as well.
yeah. Don't lose hope in this city. This city's great.
Yeah.
And the people really make the city what it is. It's like all that character, all that heart that we have as like Baltimoreans. So like never give up that hope and like always work like you have a chip on your shoulder. And yeah, come to Ekiben sometimes. We're at Falls Point, we're in Hamden, we're in South Baltimore. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok at Ekiben Baltimore. Give us a follow, give us a like, come through, tell us if our food sucks. We need
it doesn't.
criticism.
Don't worry, you don't have to do that. Well, thank you so much again for being my first guest. I think I made it through. I made it through. Again, this is No Food Picks After Dark. I'm Chris Franzoni. Eat more, be more. Stevie Chu, Ekiben, and that's a wrap. Thanks.
Never seen so many riches in my life.